sent to him some Pharisees and some Herodians to trap him in what he said. And they came and said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and show deference to no one. For you do not regard people with partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with truth. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? Should we pay them or should we not?" But knowing their hypocrisy, he said to them, "Why are you putting me to the test? Bring me a denarius and let me see it." And they brought one. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this? And whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Jesus said to them, "Give to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were utterly amazed at him. The Gospel of the Lord. So in today's Gospel reading, we find Jesus in a pretty difficult situation where there's seemingly no right answer to the question that's being put to him. The Pharisees and the Herodians were essentially trying to arrest Jesus, and so they tested him, hoping that if Jesus advocated for the payment of taxes to Caesar, then he'd become pretty unpopular with most of the Jewish people, who hated the Roman government and the fact that they were forced to support it by paying taxes to Caesar. But if Jesus spoke against paying taxes, there was the danger that the Romans would take action against him. The coin, or the denarius, which is mentioned in the reading, would have had a depiction of Caesar on one side, and it would have had the words "Son of the Divine Augustus," words which from a Jewish viewpoint shouldn't be applied to any human being, let alone a Roman pagan. Jesus does something pretty surprising, which obviously deserved the reaction of amazement that we see at the end of the reading. Jesus somehow manages to answer their question without falling into the trap. Jesus responds to the Pharisees and Herodians' questions with quite a positive assessment on political responsibility of the people of God. To be loyal to God doesn't necessarily demand civil disobedience. But the way that Jesus talks about giving back to Caesar what is Caesar's is the same sort of way you might talk about paying back a debt. But the second way in which he talks about giving back to God what is God's is a little bit more open-ended. And it depends on the reader's understanding of what God's claim on his people might be. But what is striking is that Jesus affirms, in principle, the basic legitimacy of human government, and after all, it was instituted by God. But he is also insistent that one's obligation to God is always greater. And that quite limits what is owed to the state. On the one hand, you have sort of the purely material, like the taxes and the money, which is owed to Caesar, whereas we are God's. So to reflect, I suppose something that comes to mind from this reading is the concept of surrender. In what ways do we remain obedient to God, and in what ways do we remain faithful in our everyday life as we fulfill our obligations? I think at times we have all tried to get out of our obligations. The Jews certainly would have preferred not to pay tax to Caesar, and throughout the Bible and today, his people, while they've been faithful, have also messed up quite a lot. Trying to run away from what they know is the right thing to do. But we see that Jesus in his life and on the cross submitted himself so completely, not withholding anything, but fully surrendering and trusting in the goodness of God, to the extent that he submits himself to Roman authorities by suffering for our sins on the cross. So I encourage you to reflect on these 2 points. How can I live more authentically? How can I be obedient in those areas in my life where I find it difficult to be? And what am I withholding? What am I not willing to give over, to surrender to God?